What's going on, everybody? My name is Ben, and welcome back to another episode of the NATO versus Warsaw Pact group build. We are back on the bench with our 1/48 scale trumpeter Su-15 Flagon-A. Today I'm going to go ahead and push forward here on the aircraft to get that nose cone installed and work on some of the more fidgety parts. Last time we went ahead and tacked down the canopy, got that all nicely masked off. So today, let's go ahead and focus on the rear tail of the aircraft. Now the early Su-15s had a very different layout of air scoops and vents than the later Su-15s had. And since this is the early version, we're going to go ahead and install the early version of air scoops. These are actually very long and they sit very tall up off the back of the engine area. I'm not sure if that's really accurate, but we're going to go with it. I'm hoping this is going to be accurate enough. So let's go ahead and just sand down some of these parts. Starting here on the back of the intake scoop, we're going to go ahead and put a little bit of that extra thin Tamiya right here around the edge, and then we'll glue that down first. It sits very, very close, if not slightly over the back of the rear tail cone. Once that's all nicely firmed up, we'll go ahead and drop a little bit of glue on the front part of that. We'll hold that down to make sure it's nice and secure. So let's go ahead and dive into a quick time lapse, guys. We're going to work on the intakes here, all the vents on the top and the bottom of the aircraft. Make sure we get all those air scoops nicely glued down. Let's get this thing done. So moving right along, let's go ahead and tackle the front nose. We had mentioned a little bit before that there is a lot of space up on this front nose. There's actually nothing inside, and the fact of the matter is the Su-15 is a little tail heavy. Because of that, I want to go ahead and try to add some weight into the front of the nose cone. Luckily, like I said, it's a giant nose cone, so we have plenty of room to go ahead and add as much weight as we want. It seems to be, like I said, a little bit tail heavy, so let's go ahead and grab some copper BBs. And to go ahead and secure those, we're going to be using some Elmer's white school glue. The nice thing about Elmer's school glue is that it's not going to react with the plastic. It's not going to damage anything. It's not really going to do anything except just firm up and keep those BBs from rolling around on the inside of the aircraft. Now to go ahead and get these all nicely glued in here, we're going to be using a layering method. We're going to pour in some white school glue. Then we're going to go ahead and pour the BBs in on top of that, mix it up, add more BBs, add more glue, and just layer it bit by bit. Now, once we get that all nicely poured in there, let's go ahead and drop some BBs inside. Very important, make sure to spill a few. That's very, very key information right there. Then we'll just mix that up, make sure the glue is nicely diffused all around those BBs, get them all nicely secured. And then we'll go ahead and pour in a little bit more. And this time around, make sure to spill the majority of them onto your desk. That's really important. Then get fed up and dump the rest of them in. That's kind of what you want to do with that. And after everything is nicely inserted here with the glue in, we can see that we have a chunk of BBs in here. Everything is nicely glued together, but it will have to take some time to dry. That's the one downfall of using white school glue, is that it takes a little bit of time to go ahead and cure up. But once it's cured, it's not going to go anywhere. And we'll just let that dry for probably a good 24 hours. Now let's go ahead and move over here to the missiles. Now I'm looking through my parts and I'm actually missing a tail cone for one of the R-98 missiles. And that's unfortunate unfortunate. I pulled out some ends to some old Bullpup missiles, and those should be able to be manipulated in such a way where we have something that looks close enough. Nothing on this kit is accurate anyway, so it doesn't much matter. Let's go ahead and queue up that time lapse. We're going to work on all the missiles here. We're going to get those glued up and assembled, get that scratch building done, and then we're going to go ahead and also clean up the hard points and get those attached to the fuselage. Let's keep on keeping on. Now the missiles will be glued on to these launcher rails, much like this right here, in about this position. There's a very large locating tab that we need to go ahead and make sure we're positioned correctly. It sits very much forward. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but it looks good enough to me, so I think we're okay with that. And there's actually two different types of R98 missiles, which we need to look back our references and figure out which one goes on which pylon, but I think we're okay with those. We also have our gun pods, and I think these are nicely cleaned up. We're ready to go ahead and glue those down. We won't glue them in just yet though, because I want to see what color they are and kind of get them all nicely painted up. Going back to those air scoops, there's actually a couple of them here on the bottom of the aircraft that we needed to go ahead and do a little bit of work to. For some reason, they just had a little bit of a gap between the air intake and the fuselage, So what I've done is I've slipped in a little bit of plasticard right in between the air intake and the fuselage. That should actually help to keep everything in one piece. Now we're just going to go ahead and slice those off, clean them up a little bit so you don't really notice that there's an extra piece of plastic in there, and I think we'll be good to go ahead and move on from there. There's something about the intakes here on the early Su-15s. They just are massive. But a little bit of sanding here with the jeweler files. Next time we'll come back, we'll sand it down again with our sandpaper, and I think we'll be okay. Just par for the course for this kit. Little things just tend to go wrong, and we just got to make them work, and well, that's what we're doing. Also, a slight modification that I did make is on the side of the aircraft, there was a little bit of a molded in vent. I shaved that off and I sanded it down because it just didn't look right. And I went ahead and took another vent that we're not going to be using and I just glued that down in place. I think that's a much better look for sure. Now, I'm not sure if it's 100% accurate, but I think it's going to be good enough for this kit. The missiles turned out okay. You can see I did the scratch building on the one. I had to rebuild that tail cone. It's not perfect, but I think it'll be good for what it is. And then the gun pods, of course, are all nicely cleaned up with the guns installed and the barrels drilled out. We're ready for installation. Moving right along, guys, let's go ahead and glue in the nose. This has taken about a day to dry, and the BBs and glue, they're not going anywhere, so I think it's time to go ahead and glue this nose down. One of the nice things about Elmer's school glue, like I said, is it's not going to melt plastic, it's not going to affect anything. Now, it's not as heavy as some weights you can buy, but that's okay. I didn't need a ton of weight, I just needed enough to kick that center of gravity a bit more forward of the center mass of the aircraft. Now let's go ahead and take a little bit of that extra thin Tamiya cement, run it all the way around the lip here on the front nose. Then let's position up the locating tabs and press it together. We're going to hold this for a few seconds here, make sure we have a nice firm pressure. And then we're going to go ahead and just slowly start dropping that glue around the entire seam on the outside of the aircraft. This really should give us a very nice strong bond, and I want to make sure I have as strong of a bond as possible because we're going to have to come back and sand down this lip, get everything nicely tapered in. Like I said, run that glue all around the entire seam, and I think we'll be ready to go ahead and call it quits for today. And here we go, guys. It's been about 15 minutes since I installed the nose. It hasn't moved anywhere, but we're still going to leave it for about a day. I'm going to put it up on its tail, so gravity is going to help me pull that nose down and keep a little bit of pressure, plus the extra weight in the nose should make sure that this stays put. Everything's looking great, guys. I'm really having a good time with this kit. After the installation of our nose weight and our nose cone, the center of gravity has shifted from about the center of the wings all the way up to right about here. With the white dot, that's about where our center of gravity is. It's somewhere right around there. So that's actually much better than it was. I think that's going to make sure that we keep on all three gears and we don't end up being a tail dragger. We've got our hard points on, our scoops are on, everything's looking pretty good. We might need a little bit of touch up here on some glue areas. And of course, that front nose cone has to be sanded and tapered down. But let's go ahead and call it quits for today. Thank you so much for joining me here on episode number 10. Next episode will come on back, and I think it's about time to go ahead and put down some nice primer coats. So until our next episode, you know the drill. Go out there, get yourself some bench time, have some fun, build something cool, and we will see you back here on episode number 11. Thanks so much, everybody. We'll see you soon.